Hey class, today we are going to be talking about the characteristics of living and non-living things. So we're going to start with the living things. So living things are made up of cells. They have the ability to obtain and use energy. So they take energy from the sun and use that to either grow or pass that on to other organisms. They also have the ability to grow and develop, which means they start off small from birth because they can reproduce, and then they develop and end up growing bigger and grow into their full size. As I touched on, they have the ability to reproduce, so parents make offspring, and lastly, they can adapt to their environment. So this shows that if something happens to their environment or their ecosystem or habitat, they have the ability to change what they do in order to cope to that event. All right, so now we are moving on to non-living things. So the following things do not have these qualities. They are not able to grow, so they stay one size for their entire life. They do not have the ability to reproduce. And lastly, they do not have the ability to move on their own. So unlike the rock from SpongeBob, these rocks don't actually move.
Okay, so we're going to talk about what's living and what's not living using the characteristics we just went over in the ocean setting. So first, obviously, we have the big turtle chilling in the middle. He's obviously living because he's made of cells, can use energy, grows, develops, reproduces, and so on. Another thing that's not as obvious is probably the coral, all this underwater growth. It doesn't really move, but it's still living. It still uses the sunlight to grow and reproduce. Next we got the things that are probably not living in this. So obviously we have the rocks in the background. They don't reproduce. They don't adapt to their environment. And then we have the water. Water is not living either. It's not living. It doesn't use energy. It's not made of cells. It doesn't grow or develop. Okay, our next setting is a desert. Very dry and barren, so it's a lot less life forms than what we saw in the ocean. The only thing really here that is living are the cacti. They are a form of plant. They obtain and use energy from the sunlight, and they grow and develop. They don't need as much water. That's why they're able to survive in the desert, unlike other plants which are seen here rotting away, not living. Obviously, we have the rocks again. The rocks are just like in the ocean. They're not living. We also have the sand everywhere. That's just part of the habitat. There's no growth. They're not made of cells. Sand does not reproduce, and it has no living characteristics. So here we have another setting. This is the rainforest setting. Some things that are living, obviously all the trees, the bushes over here, all the tree roots you can see, and I'm sure there's some species of bird flying up around here, making their home. Obviously birds, trees, made of cells, obtain, use energy. Some things that are not living, obviously again the rocks, the water we've talked about.
All right guys, so as we talked about with the living things, they have the ability to adapt to their environment and if something happens to their environment. So what we have right now, we're just going to give you guys a quick example of a beaver. And so beavers build dams to block off the water from their habitat. So right here, what you have is the actual dam that the beavers built. And down here is the habitat where the beavers live. So what would happen if, say, a flood came in over their habitat? So a flood is an excess of water due to extreme rain or something else happening. And so say this pond or riverbed that the beavers decided to dam flooded, it would leak over this dam, and therefore breaking water into the beaver's habitat. So what the beavers would do is chop down more trees and build this up higher so that the water flow would stop coming over the top, or they would move to a different section. But the most likely scenario, that would only happen if the flooding was too bad or their environment was too damaged by the water already. So the most likely scenario would be chopping down more trees to build the dam up higher so that the water flow would stop coming over the top and stop flooding their habitat.